We're absolutely living in like probably the craziest timeline. Last week, we had the biggest IPO, as you guys know, the biggest IPO in the history. And if you asked me like 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, that company would not be software. It will not going to be, AI yet. It will not going to be something in energy. I would have probably not believed you, but obviously it was actually an industrial company, probably the company that builds like very advanced systems. So it's great. As an ex-SpaceXer, I was excited to that finally happen. But it was not a normative road, right? It was a very creative way of building a business. A lot of challenges that are not, kind of normative ways of, scaling the business. If you think about SpaceX, it's actually like 25, 26 years old, so it took a while as well. I guess, and so the question becomes, if you want to reindustrialize, how do we do this? How do we do this at scale? How do we have not just one SpaceX, 10 SpaceX, 100 SpaceX, 1,000 SpaceXs, right? So this is what we're going to talk about today. My name is Edward Mehr. I am CEO and co-founder at Machina Labs. We develop manufacturing systems, manufacturing technologies that are focused on agility, gets you part faster than a traditional tech could do. But also, I have a lot of good diverse perspective on the stage. We have Jim from SendCutSend. I think Jim, honestly, I was in his shop floor a few weeks ago, probably one of the best operators in the United States. It was the most smoothly run shop floor for a high mix environment that I've ever seen, so excited to have his perspective. We also have Billy, and he's a co-founder and CEO of REGENT. If you guys haven't seen it, they built this coolest plane and a boat together. It's a bit of a lost art, and they're bringing it back. They actually have their fuselage out. So we're gonna have also a perspective of somebody on the integrator side, right? How they're thinking about scale. So let's jump right into it. Well, how are you guys thinking about scale, right? What does the success look like? How do we know we have gotten there? What are you guys measuring? Jimmy?
I think before you talk about scale, you have to make it exist first. So the best way to do scale is just to do something. I think there's too many people that are trying to do these huge things out of nothing, and they've never done anything before. So make it exist, then make it good. The other answer is there's no right or wrong way to do scale. There's a bunch of different dimensions or definitions. The only thing that I can speak to is what we did. And I started in my garage, outgrew the garage, got a building, outgrew the building, did it little by little over a long period of time. And we were able to do that because we didn't know what the hell we were doing, and I didn't have any money, but it made us stronger, and the patience allowed us to become more valuable in the end. So I'm hoping, raise your hand if you're an investor in this room. Okay, be patient. This is not, SaaS, crypto AI stuff. You're not gonna make 100-bagger in 2 years. Manufacturing and hardware is somewhere where you have to be patient, and I know a lot of you guys are kind of changing your mindset there, and it's helping all of us who are out there actually building real shit, so.
Yeah. When I think about scale at REGENT, we were talking in the green room before coming out, and it was so interesting comparing the perspectives that I've had scaling REGENT and building a vehicle that has not existed before, and we sort of need to get to very large degrees of scale to sort of deliver the first thing versus Jim's experience being able to do that more bootstrapping step-by-step process. So when I think about scale from sea gliders, which for those of you who don't know is an electric flying boat, as Ed mentioned, really first new mode of transportation since the helicopter. So for me, it's, sea gliders on every single coastline of the world, and when your kids go to school and they're in kindergarten, they learn about the modes of transportation, and it's boats and planes and cars and trains and sea gliders. Like, that is success to me, that's scale, but to get there, from our perspective, we sort of have to take a different approach in that we don't really have the luxury of delivering one or two before we go to scale. We sort of have to think about scale at the same time as our first deliveries. We need to set up our manufacturing capabilities and our supply chain to be able to unlock scale literally years before we've delivered the first vehicle. When we're still in R&D and still in testing, we need to be getting these manufacturing facilities online. And so we are keenly aware of metrics, yes, about metrics. And the metric I obviously track as a Sea Glider manufacturer is how many Sea Gliders have we delivered, and the answer to date is 0. I mean, it is a very big 0. So we need to put in this plan over many years. How do we capitalize? How do we form the right partners? How do we leverage local government so that we can start notching wins in that delivery column, but we can do that ahead of the first delivery. We need to get everything online to unlock that scale.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think obviously, like, when we think about scale, it's always kind of the number of parts produced, which is the real only tangible things you want to look at. But when you're kind of a little bit earlier stage and you're on your way to get to the scale, what are you prioritizing? What is the proxy that you're looking at that will unlock the number eventually? What is that metric that like a smaller, earlier stage company can look at to say, hey, like I'm on the way to scale?
Yeah, for me, and coming from the prototyping and sort of readiness for manufacturing side, on the prototyping side, it's flight hours, it's test hours, it's sorties. So we've been testing our vehicle for over a year now. We're up over 75 sorties, but continuing to build experience and proof points there on the prototype. On the manufacturing side, it's percent of the BOM that we have locked down in the supply chain. It's how many square feet of manufacturing space do we have, and actually just made an announcement this morning that we opened our 250,000 square foot manufacturing facility. So we're at 250,000 now. So that's been super exciting, and now, to the point I was just making, we have to fill it in, right? So we have this beautiful new building, and now we have to move in and be able to spool up that manufacturing with the lessons we learned from the prototype.
Yeah. One of the metrics that we watch when we decide if we're scaling fast enough or not is how many toilets we have. So you start running out of toilets or there's a line to the bathroom, you probably have a good amount of scale. Really what that means is utilization of equipment and square footage. When you are running a building 24/7 and there's always a warm pot of coffee in the kitchen and you don't even have a security system anymore because someone's always there, that's an indicator of scale. Yeah. And then, like I said, literally we start running out of bathrooms and we're like, okay, we should probably look at a new region to go into and go from there. But we start out with, one shift and a skeleton crew, and then add shifts until we start running out of power or parking lots or, all these other weird things that happen at scale. But you get good at it. So start small. Like, oh my God, if I would have got money 8 years ago when I started, I would have built 4 huge facilities in the wrong areas of the country, and I would have bought the wrong equipment, and I would have hired the wrong people. Yes, I can't do it with Sea Gliders, but I was able to start small and then grow into it, and we watch that metric, the catering metric or the parking spot metric or the toilet metric.
I love that. I think one thing, especially like Jim, you said to me, and I think SendCutSend does it really well, is like think about rate before you get to scale. Like rate of how fast are you doing things. I love the fact that you can order like a SendCutSend part and receive it the same day. If your company feels agile, it seems like it is on its way to get to scale. If you're building things fast, people feel like, hey, things are moving really fast. I think that's a very good foundation to later on scale. So speaking of scale, you can't talk about scale without the big elephant in the room, China, right? It's called US's factory, not hopefully for too long. How are you guys thinking about scale uniquely in an American way? Because a lot of people, when we talk about China, they're like, okay, China is ahead of us, and they are. If for anybody who's been to Shenzhen or in any of the manufacturing areas in China, you'll see that they're have a significant more scale than us today. But how should we think about competing? Right? Should we just follow and exactly build what they built? How do we get ahead of them? How do we be like 10 years in front of them, plan for 10 years in front of them? How do we create this advantage?
Yeah, Billy?
I think when we sort of compare U.S. manufacturing capacity to China, step one is like, what tools are they using, and sort of establish that foundation, and then we can think about, how do we do better with them with all the tools and talent we have in America. So, step one is the significant level of government subsidies that China is able to put into their manufacturing capacity. I'm coming at this from a very sort of vehicle-oriented perspective in aerospace and defense and maritime and building these big things that take a lot of CapEx and take a lot of design time, and you have to build big factories, big complicated things to put them together. China does an incredible job. They're putting hundreds of millions of billions of dollars into a lot of their new aerospace companies. And actually, I would say over the past 2 or 3 years, we are starting to see some of those benefits and some of that government subsidy come to the U.S. So, in our example, we set up in Rhode Island. That 250,000 square foot facility is a $40 million building, which is pretty hard to subsidize with equity. If I raise a financing round, I'm like, it's all going into steel. Like, that's not a great sell. So to be able to leverage that government support, state of Rhode Island, building these facilities, having permitting and zoning already approved, so we can go from an empty dirt lot to moving into this building in 18 months. Like, that is a huge advantage. Rhode Island's just one example of the ecosystem that's doing that, but there are many others. Ohio is doing it, certainly. North Carolina's had some great success. Georgia has some other examples. East Coast really holding it down as we're in Detroit here. So we've seen those examples, and that's how we get there, is sort of set the foundation. Let's use all the same tools, at least, that China's using.
Yeah. I also think that, like you said earlier, we got to use the same playbook that they're using. Government subsidies are a big part of their playbook, it appears. The other thing that I notice is collaboration. So the cool thing about China is you can have a guy doing stamping and a guy doing heat treating and a guy doing PCBs and harnesses and whatever, and they're all kind of in the same neighborhood and they all know each other and you can just run around. So from the outside, it appears like they're this one big massive factory, but really it's just a bunch of dudes that are getting along with each other, and they collaborate and they share customers, they share the wealth a little bit. And I think with all the talk around reindustrialization and manufacturing and hardware nowadays, we're seeing more and more of that. Like, just events like this, it helps manufacturers meet other manufacturers, hardware guys meet other hardware guys and collaborate. I had 2 conversations this morning just on the way in here where it's like, hey, what if we had an API where if our customer gives us a bill of materials, if we can't do the PCB, maybe the API can just spit out the PCB to you. You fulfill it directly to the customer. Same thing with harnessing, same thing with motors or whatever you guys want to make. We're at the early stages of that now, but it's happening. It's better than it ever has been. I will tell you, 10 or 20 years ago when I was trying to get something made, I'd go to a manufacturer and say, hey, can you give this to me, turnkey? And they're like, oh, no, you gotta, I'll make this part, but you gotta take it to this guy to weld it, and you gotta take it to this guy to powder coat it, and this guy to do the packaging. And it was a huge pain in the ass. That's starting to go away. We're trying to do some of it vertically. Vertical integration is the big thing, but collaboration is something that we can do today, and it doesn't really cost anything. Yeah. It's a handshake.
Makes a lot of sense. I think the one thing we've seen in defense a lot is that requirements really flow from top down, right? Like, the government sets requirements, gets to primes then build supply chain underneath it, but then because the requirements very top down, the supply chain end up being very bespoke, right? I almost feel like we need to figure out a way to flip that model, right? Build this foundational layer, puzzle pieces of how to do manufacturing, and then let engineers design on top of that natively, right? And so it requires a little bit of hydration on the bottom, so that we have a very solid supply chain and building blocks, and then building something on top of it.
Yeah, that's all we do.
Yeah.
Is teach people how to make stuff, because just because you can design it doesn't mean that it can be manufactured. So yeah, someone will have these very specific requirements. We have to politely explain that they're insane and coach them to make some modifications to their design so that it can be manufactured. So if, even at the government level, if they were somehow more flexible in their requirements, which they're not going to do, or at least we can educate the engineers on, hey, here's what it's like to make something, here's your limitations, work within those constraints, and you can have it good, fast, and cheap.
Yeah. All right, we have 30 seconds. Let's maybe do a quick round. We have a lot of investors, we have a lot of policymakers in the room. from your perspective, there's a lot of excitement in the space. Lots of companies are opening, lots of factories are being opened up. How do we differentiate which company is about to scale? What are the signals to look for versus not?
Yeah, I think in the early stage, it's really about execution and sort of a defined, defensible moat. I think one of the reasons why we're seeing so much capital flowing into the hardware space, finally, this is freaking awesome, is because of the moat building. Like, this is hard to do when you build stuff in the real world and you break it. You don't just get to revert your code to whatever you had an hour ago. Like, you have to assess, you have to root cause, you have to redesign, you have to go out and test things and qualify things again. Those are long processes. Those take a lot of effort. But in doing all that, you're building very durable moats. And so I think when you're identifying sort of the next companies that define a new space or remake a new space, sort of bringing it back to SpaceX, like being able to lower the cost to get to orbit by multiple orders of magnitude, that completely remakes a space. So when you have an idea, when you have a company that A, can completely remake a space, B, has very durable, lasting moats, and then C, you've already shown a pathway towards execution, that you're out competing any other competition that could go capture that moat. To me, those are sort of the key three things you need.
Awesome. We're past time, but any thoughts?
Just build something that people need, or build something that solves your problem. Find patient investors who believe in you, and then they let you do your own thing. And then just hire good dudes. Yes, robotics and stuff helps. Automation is cool. Lights out, humanoid, whatever. That's fine. That's coming. Hire good dudes. America will thrive. Yeah.
Solid. Awesome. Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks, Bill.
All right, thanks, guys.